Welcome to the Royal Ranger Podcast, where we are talking about all things Royal Rangers and building an effective discipleship ministry for boys in your church. I'm Carl Flight, the National Director for Royal Rangers USA, and my co-host is John Hicks, the National Programs and Curriculum Coordinator. Thank you for joining us for this episode. Let's jump into it. We are actually in the middle of renovations in our building. Last week when I got back from traveling, I was informed that they were going to be cutting away at the structure right outside of our offices. And as a result, we needed to vacate. In case you didn't know, here at headquarters, our building is going through a major renovation. They are removing the exterior walls from the entire building and updating them and replacing them with updated glass panels, which will give us greater insulation and weather or temperature control properties, as well as make the building look brand new. So my office is on the fourth floor. They haven't got to my windows yet. However, part of the renovation is a brand new entrance to national headquarters. And that entrance is going to be right below the windows that are in my office. It's a 3-story glass entrance, and that's where all the cutting and opening up of structures and all of that is happening as they put that new entrance into that. And then also the podcast area, our media center is going through an 8-month renovation. And so everybody's kind of figuring out how to operate in the new normal. It's a little bit like COVID. We're just all displaced and got to refigure that, but we're going through that process. But anyway, we thought with all the turmoil, this might be a great month for us to do a throwback episode of the Ranger podcast. We are going to replay an episode to you. Pastor Petrucci, who's a pastor in Delaware, has a church where they are doing Royal Rangers, and they're all in. They figured out how the ministries work together inside of their church and all of that. But a great interview, great information on how his church manages to have all of the ministries working together in collusion with each other. And so hopefully this is a great episode. It was great then. Hopefully you like it again. So thank you for understanding. And hopefully next month we will have it all figured out and be able to come to you with another podcast. In the meantime, enjoy this episode.
Well, welcome back to the National Royal Ranger Podcast. I'm your host, Rob, as we continue to talk about all things Royal Rangers. Well, today I am thrilled to have with me. I've heard about this gentleman and this pastor for quite a while. I came upon him through a YouTube video that somebody recommended to me. But he is the Northeast region chaplain, but he's a senior pastor of Praise Assembly in Delaware, right?
That's right.
Delaware, yep. And I'm thrilled to have with us Pastor Mike Petrucci with us. Thanks for being with us today, Mike.
Yeah, Rob, thanks for asking me to dialogue with you today. And thanks for doing these podcasts. I just hope that our discussion today will be helpful to those who might be listening.
Absolutely. I think it will. Well, today we're going to be talking about working together in unity as a local church. Now, I've asked a pastor to be with us today because as a senior pastor, he has a unique perspective of being able to support his Royal Ranger outpost. I know he can't necessarily be in all the meetings because everything else he does, but we always want to make sure that when we have Rangers at our local outpost, we're in unison with the other departments, the other ministries, and we want to discuss that more. So kind of as we start this conversation, Pastor, let me ask this. In your experience, what do you see of the importance of Royal Rangers? And we'll talk girls ministries as well, too, because we know girls ministry leaders listen. What do you see of their importance today in the local church and why?
Yeah, well, Rob, the answer to your question is really simple and very, very obvious. I believe that all the various church ministries that we have that are operating our churches, there's none more evangelistic than Royal Rangers and girls ministries. Just by design, if we could pull our local outpost coordinators in Royal Rangers, for example, we'd find that probably half of the boys that come to their outpost meetings every week are from outside their church. They're not just their own boys. There's a good amount of outside visitors who are taking part in Royal Rangers. At least that's pretty much how it is in our church, and I've polled some around me. It's very much the same. And of course, we wish there whole families came to our church, but we're happy to have the boys. And so I think that's proof alone that it's an evangelistic tool. And the same with girls' ministries. We have gained families over the years. The boys came first, or the girl came first, and then the parents followed. And I know there's some discipleship experts out there, they tell us, well, if you get the father, you get the head of the household first, then the entire family follows. But bottom line, I don't care how people come to Christ. I don't care how families come to Christ. Any single family member, whether it be a young girl or young boy, if they come to church and they come to Christ, they're going to have an influence on their own family. Mm-hmm. And in fact, that's how it worked in my life. I was the first one saved in my family. And it was as a college freshman. Came home, brought the gospel with me, and my mom got saved. A couple sisters got saved. Eventually, over time, another brother, and then last was my father. Took 30 years. Yeah, it just takes that one connection. So Rangers does it so well. And you might want to ask me, well, what about other ministries in the church, like youth group? Isn't that evangelistic? And really, it isn't, because the kids are old enough that the parents can just dump them off. But with Royal Rangers and girls' ministries, the parents have to be more involved. And they're concerned about what their kids might be learning. So the boy or girl comes home, if they know Jesus, and the parent starts asking them about, well, what do you mean Jesus? Why is Jesus so important to you all of a sudden? And they start telling their mom or dad, they're explaining. Again, teenager comes home, teenager goes to his room, and you have to pull answers out of them. But there's so much more interaction between young children and parents. So Rangers is perfect for that. Girls' Ministries is great for that.
Yeah. Well, let me ask this question. We didn't have this as a one that we were going to talk about, but you kind of bring it up. There's a lot of churches and outposts, and each one's different in their unique perspective in doing so. But there's a lot of them that only have Rangers that go K through 5th, and then they really put and encourage their kids to go to youth group. And we know that boys want to continue. They want to continue to be discipleship, and they're working towards their gold medal of achievement. What do you say to the families or the outposts that really want to continue, but they feel there's that competition between youth ministry and Royal Rangers, that they're pulling back and forth? What do you say to that?
Yeah, well, first off, there really shouldn't be any competition between any ministry and a local church.
Absolutely.
I mean, again, though, that does happen. And that's the way it was here when I first came 23 years ago, 1998. And on Wednesday nights, we had Royal Rangers, girls' ministries, and youth group. And youth group was the largest because boys want to go where girls are and girls want to go where boys are. It ended when I realized youth ministry doesn't have to be on Wednesday nights. It can be on a separate night. So I started to make the move towards that, talk to my youth leader. And let me kind of back up a little bit.
Sure. One
of the reasons that churches give youth ministry so much more prominence is because usually that church is paying a youth leader. It's a focus ministry. It has one person who's getting paid, even if it's part-time, and focuses on that. Rangers is, I'm guessing most churches, is completely volunteer, and girls' ministries as well. So I think the pastor of the church, when he's putting together a budget, thinks about a calendar, youth ministry comes first. He's got to give that, I say man, but you have women too running youth ministries. He's got to give him everything he can to make him a success in his portfolio. So that's too bad. It doesn't have to be that way. But the first thing I did, going back to 1998, was to talk to my youth guy and say, look, would you mind doing youth group on a different night? And he didn't. Again, we're paying him. He's being compensated. And so we moved it to Friday nights. And it all looked really good. I mean, it would be more work for him because he's coming out an extra night of the week. And then we fine-tuned it to 2 times a month, not every week, twice a month instead of every week, because the kids were picking and choosing. Like, I'll go this Friday, but not the next Friday. And so when they only had 2 options to pick from, they were there both times. So attendance went up on Friday nights by him cutting it back to twice a month. The other thing he did, and a youth leader I don't think you can run a great youth program in 90 minutes on a Wednesday night. Kids have school the next day. They come in, they've had a long day at school, but the weekends here, we've reformatted so it was 7 a.m. to at least 10 p.m. So that student has 3 hours and a lot to do. And there's they don't have to be done exactly at 10 either. Whereas at 8:30, again, our midweek was 7 to 8:30. 8:30 comes, everybody's got to go home. Mom and dad's picking up the younger kids and getting their teenager and going. So it really worked out better. In the end, everybody was very happy. Now, I would say there was some pushback initially because some parents are thinking, oh no, I've got to take my kid out again on a Friday night. I don't want to go out Friday night. It's the end of the week, long work week. And I did. We got some pushback. Why can't we just do it Wednesday when I'm already there at church? But you know what? That pushback only lasted a couple of weeks. And then they all got used to it. And they realized that this is much better than doing it midweek. Mm-hmm. So that's pretty much, I mean, it really was an improvement. It wasn't trying to end the competition. It just improved the situation. Youth group got exactly what it needed without any restrictions. And Rangers can still function quite well in 90 minutes. Some recreation for the boys, and then get into the achievements.
So you kind of already have kind of gone into the next question we were talking about. You said you've answered how effective was this ministry in your local context. You've seen it that it was effective. It was just working with the youth leader and trying to work together on his schedule. There was a little bit of pushback, but over the last 23 years that you've been the senior pastor, from what I've heard, your Royal Ranger outpost is pretty large. What has been the significant? Now, I know it's not about the size of the outpost. It's about the discipleship and seeing them grow in the Lord. Maybe share some stories of how, because of this, discipleship has been working better.
Yeah, I got you. Well, I mean, the main thing we have to remember about Rangers and girls ministries, and this is where they're truly significant, is that they're gender specific.
Yeah.
It's great in youth group for boys and girls to have, the ability to get together socially. And there's a spiritual element, and that's great. And there's all kinds of activities, but there's something when there's no other way to say this, being gender specific, you get to touch on some very touchy topics. When you talk about sexuality, you don't have a mixed crowd where the girls are giggling at times and the boys are giggling. These are seasoned men, seasoned leaders telling boys, this is what life is really like. Yeah. I mean, boys, that's just a relief, man to boy, truly trying to mentor them and develop them. And I just think you need those times alone, and you can't have the other gender there. You can't have the other sex there.
Yeah.
So that's been the big thing. The other thing too, a lot of boys simply didn't want to work very hard in Rangers when we had it all on one night. So they chose youth group by default. If I go to youth group, everything's done for me. If I go to Rangers, hey, I've got to work on things. And so when we finally had to, separate it to Friday nights, when Wednesday came around, the boys who were ducking out to youth group, they came back around to Rangers. Yeah, they really did. And then they got to like it because it was a band of brothers.
They had to work. I know in our local context, when I came on board, we did some changes, and we had some boys who didn't come back, and this was in discovery and everything, because we were actually moving forward and doing more work, and they just wanted to be for the social, which we're not against the social mentality, right, but we wanted to make sure we were doing the work and doing so. Let me ask this. What has been some of the greatest things in both girls ministry and Royal Rangers in your church to be able to reach those families, to see them get plugged in and be supportive of Rangers and just get them backing the ministry as a whole?
Some of the 50% of our outpost is not from our church. Those are already churched. They're going to stay at their church, and we're okay with that. Mm-hmm. Some of those folks are, they're evangelical. They know Jesus. They might be Presbyterian, Methodist, not just AG at another church. Mm-hmm. And that's fine. We're glad for that. We're not trying to pull them away. But what I have found is that the unsaved do eventually come to, say, a Ranger ceremony here at church, and we try to make that very visible. Sometimes on Sunday nights, because of COVID in the last 2 years, Sunday mornings only, which actually works out better. People, unsaved aren't used to going to church on a nighttime, but they'll come Sunday morning, and then they get a little bit more interested in what we're doing, and they hang around and they get saved. And so the unchurched, I would say most of the unchurched families wind up getting saved and becoming part of our church. Yeah, it really happens.
That's awesome. Well, is there any significant stories that you have of just life change that you've seen from some of the boys over the last 23 years, or now men or young men that you've seen who were in Royal Rangers that you can remember?
I'll tell you the supreme payoff is when a boy's gone through the program, even if they've gone through half the program until age 18, when they come back and then they serve as one of our leaders or even an assistant in one of our outposts. That's the payoff right there. And that's happened time and time again. Of course, the number of GMAs we've had over the years, that boys have gone all the way through the program and then stayed with it as a helper, as an assistant of some kind, and eventually a leader. That's the payoff. Specific stories? No, I don't, because I don't have any specific stories because I'm not up there. Sure. We have a separate cabin, 4,000 square foot log cabin, kind of a mini. Yeah, it's like a mini Johnny Barnes Lodge.
That's awesome.
Cathedral ceiling in the main area, fieldstone fireplace. It's absolutely gorgeous.
That's awesome.
But I'm not up there on Wednesday nights. I'm in adult Bible study, doing something a little more boring.
Oh, but yeah, no, you touched on something that I think more than ever that the need for Royal Rangers is necessary in a world that we have, kids that will come in and saying that they're looking at transgender issues, or they're looking at, I want to be a boy or a girl, going back and forth. I'm a local children's pastor, and I have new families coming in, and I have kids who are saying those things, and then I have to work through them. What does the Bible say? I think in today's society, there's a need for more than ever for girls' ministries and Royal Rangers. And to you, if there's a local church that's, as a local pastor, you would say, if there's a church that maybe is looking for a ministry, based on your experience, I know you recommend Rangers, but what do you say to that pastor who's looking for something to reach kids today?
I think any pastor who's just looking to grow his church needs to have these programs.
Yeah.
It's not just trying to start the program or grow that program, but as that program grows, they're going to grow their church. I'm telling you, any pastor that doesn't at least look at Royal Rangers is missing out on a highly effective tool for evangelism. I don't look at Rangers just as a gender-specific mentoring program. I'm looking at it from the evangelistic aspect.
Yeah.
And it's a natural form of evangelism. It's not forced. A new boy comes in, and he's surrounded by maybe 4 or 5 Christian boys who are talking this new language, a different language than his. Wow, he either has to really look at what they're saying, what they're doing. He's got to consider what they're doing, or he has to reject it and just not want to come back. And if that boy hangs around a few weeks, he's going to want to be like those boys. He's going to want their Savior. And then, as I said before, that's going to infiltrate the family when he goes home. Mm-hmm. So any pastor who really wants to see people saved and wants to see new people added to the church needs to consider Rangers and Girls Ministries. They work. I have to add that the pastor has to do some work first. Mm-hmm. If he doesn't have a Ranger ministry or a girls ministry yet, the pastor has to research Rangers, especially in light of all the changes that we've gone through in the past decade or more. Rangers have gone through unbelievable transition. This is not simply the old version of Rangers that was exclusively a camping ministry. Mm-hmm. So much more. And so the pastor's going to have to get rid of any prejudice they might have had if they've ever heard about the old Rangers. The program's more diverse. It's more flexible compared to the 1980s and 90s version. And again, the number one strength. Well, here's how I would do it. If I were going to a pastor and trying to sell him on the idea of Royal Rangers as a ministry, I would ask him if he would be interested in a gender-specific mentoring program. I don't know a pastor who would say no.
Sure.
And you know what? Scripture tells us, if you talk about a gender-specific mentoring program, that is the formula in Scripture. The Bible specifically tells us that older men are to train younger men, and older women are to teach younger girls. So if you realize, Rangers and Girls Ministry is the only way that we can do that in the church today. Everything else we do is group oriented. Everything else is family oriented, mixed by gender and age. So I'm sold on Rangers. I've been involved since 1986.
Well, before we finish today, Pastor, is there a word of encouragement that maybe you could give to the local outpost leader that maybe they're starting up, maybe they've been having the, COVID waves come and going, and, they know that God has placed them in this ministry to be able to reach boys, to equip, evangelize, and empower. But it just seems it's hard with everything going on. Is there a word that you might want to give to them?
Yeah, COVID's been tough. I feel like our kids aren't afraid of it, so attendance has rebounded on that level. Mm-hmm. Adults are still pretty cautious, It depends where you live in the country too. In general, I would say this as a way of encouragement to Ranger and Girl ministry leaders: get training, and get involved on a sectional and district and even regional level. Our National Ranger Department has some excellent training opportunities that'll, enhance the effectiveness of every leader. They're really good stuff. I mean, in-person regional training like World Class Outpost is just incredible. The National Rangers Ministry Camp is the best manhood training that I know out there. I really feel I'd love for our National Assembly of God Men's Department to grab hold of that material because it's just excellent. Guys that haven't done NRMC, National Ranger Ministry Camp, that weekend, they need to know it's more about being a man than being a ranger. Mm-hmm. And that's what our boys need, is to see real men. And then, of course, there's a minimum of 4 levels of leadership training that Ranger leaders can do on their own for personal improvement. And a lot of that's online. Hopefully more will come online. I'd say to every leader, male or female, take advantage of all the tools that you have available and stay in fellowship with other leaders. Desire to bless your outpost leader, bless your pastor, your church families, and of course, the Lord himself. And just one little word from World Class Outpost. There's a chapter in there on communication. Usually, one reason I think a lot of pastors don't get thrilled about Royal Rangers is at the end of an evening, some of the commanders will complain to the pastor about the boys and what went on and the behavior and whatever. Don't share that. Yeah. Share the glory stories. Talk about the formerly Hindu Indian boy who came out and got saved and now goes home and says grace with his parents before every meal. Awesome. Give the good news to your pastor, and that'll make him want to reinforce that ministry. Yeah, I just get the training and get in fellowship.
Well, Pastor, thank you so much for those words of encouragement for all of our Royal Ranger leaders and girls ministry leaders. If they're listening, we want to say thank you so much for your support of Royal Rangers, both in your local context as well as at the district and also at the regional events. Thank you so much for your support over the many years. Appreciate you.
Sure. Thanks, Rob, for asking me to share a few thoughts today. And I just hope they find open hearts. God bless you.
Well, thanks for listening to the National Royal Ranger Podcast. We look forward to seeing you next time. Have a great day.